Hello, friends. I wanted to make a video to address some of the controversy that's been going on over the past few days. And first of all, to say thank you to everyone that sent love and support. I truly, truly appreciate it. And it's been very nice to hear from you. I wanted to make this video, first of all, because I think there's a lot of people that have a distorted perception of what I do, maybe based on sound bites or based on headlines of articles that are disparaging. The podcast has been accused of spreading dangerous misinformation, specifically about two episodes, a little bit about some other ones, but specifically about two. One with Dr. Peter McCullough and one with Dr. Robert Malone. Dr. Peter McCullough is a cardiologist, and he is the most published physician in his field in history. Dr. Robert Malone owns 9 patents on the creation of mRNA vaccine technology and is at least partially responsible for the creation of the technology that led to mRNA vaccines. Both these people are very highly credentialed, very intelligent, very accomplished people, and they have an opinion that's different from the mainstream narrative. I wanted to hear what their opinion is. I had them on, and because of that, those episodes in particular, those episodes were labeled as being dangerous. They had dangerous misinformation in them. The problem I have with the term misinformation, especially today, is that many of the things that we thought of as misinformation just a short while ago are now accepted as fact. Like, for instance, 8 months ago, if you said, if you get vaccinated, you can still catch COVID and you can still spread COVID, you would be removed from social media. They would ban you from certain platforms. Now, that's accepted as fact. If you said, I don't think cloth masks work, you would be banned from social media. Now, that's openly and repeatedly stated on CNN. If you said, I think it's possible that COVID-19 came from a lab, you'd be banned from many social media platforms. Now, that's on the cover of Newsweek. All of those theories that at one point in time were banned were openly discussed by those two men that I had on my podcast that have been accused of dangerous misinformation. I do not know if they're right. I don't know, because I'm not a doctor, I'm not a scientist. I'm just a person who sits down and talks to people and has conversations with them. Do I get things wrong? Absolutely, I get things wrong, but I try to correct them. Whenever I get something wrong, I try to correct it because I'm interested in telling the truth. I'm interested in finding out what the truth is. And I'm interested in having interesting conversations with people that have differing opinions. I'm not interested in only talking to people that have one perspective. That's one of the reasons why I had Sanjay Gupta on, Dr. Sanjay Gupta, who I respect very much, and I really enjoyed our conversation together. He has a different opinion than those men do. I had Dr. Michael Osterholm on at the very beginning of the pandemic. He is on President Biden's COVID-19 advisory board. I had Dr. Peter Hotez on, who is a vaccine expert. I'm interested in finding out what is correct, and I'm also finding out how people come to these conclusions and what the facts are. Now, because of this controversy, and I'm sure there's a lot of other things going on behind the scenes with these controversies, but Neil Young has removed his music from the platform of Spotify, and Joni Mitchell and apparently some other people want to as well. I'm very sorry that they feel that way. I most certainly don't want that. I'm a Neil Young fan. I've always been a Neil Young fan. I'll tell you a story at the end of this about that. One of the things that Spotify wants to do that I agree with is that at the beginning of these controversial podcasts, like specifically ones about COVID, is to put a disclaimer and say that you should speak with your physician and that these people and the opinions that they express are contrary to the opinions of the consensus of experts, which I think is very important. Sure, have that on there. I'm very happy with that. Also, I think if there's anything that I've done that I could do better is have more experts with differing opinions right after I have the controversial ones. I would most certainly be open to doing that. And I would like to talk to some people that have differing opinions on those podcasts in the future. We'll see. I do all the scheduling myself, and I don't always get it right. These podcasts are very strange because they're just conversations. And oftentimes I have no idea what I'm going to talk about until I sit down and talk to people. And That's why some of my ideas are not that prepared or fleshed out, because I'm literally having them in real time. But I do my best, and they're just conversations, and I think that's also the appeal of the show. It's one of the things that makes it interesting. So I want to thank Spotify for being so supportive during this time, and I'm very sorry that this is happening to them and that they're taking so much heat from it. And so now the Neil Young story. When I first of all, I'm not mad at Neil Young. I'm a huge Neil Young fan. I've always been a Neil Young fan. When I was 19, I was a security guard at a place called Great Woods in Mansfield, Massachusetts. It's an outdoor concert amphitheater, and Neil Young was playing there, and that was the last day I worked there. I quit during the Neil Young concert. The job was kind of crazy because there was a lot of times there was fights broke out and stuff, and I think I probably got like $15 an hour, and I was not about to get beat up for $15 an hour. So I would bring a hoodie with me whenever I worked. So in case the shit hit the fan and it got too crazy, I would just put my hoodie on and leave and cover my security outfit, my security shirt. So one day during a Neil Young concert, there's the amphitheater, the way it's set up is there's a covered area outside that has seats, and then there's a lawn area behind it. And the lawn area during the Neil Young concert, they got a little rowdy. It was cold out, and they started bonfires. So they had these raging fires on the lawn, and we were supposed to go and put these fires out and stop them. So we tried for a little while, but then brawls started breaking out, and it started getting crazy. And I was like, fuck this. So I put my hoodie on, I zipped it up, and I left. And I drove home, and as I was driving home, I was singing, "Keep on rocking in the free world." That was my last day on the job. I don't even think I collected my last check. So no hard feelings towards Neil Young, and definitely no hard feelings towards Joni Mitchell. I love her too. I love her music. Chucky's in Love is a great song. I don't know what else I can do differently other than maybe try harder to get people with differing opinions on right afterwards. I do think that that's important, and do my best to make sure that I've researched these topics, the controversial ones in particular, and have all the pertinent facts at hand before I discuss them. Again, I'm not trying to promote misinformation. I'm not trying to be controversial. I've never tried to do anything with this podcast other than just talk to people and have interesting conversations. I didn't plan it. I can't believe it's as successful as it is. It was never really an idea that I had. The podcast started off as just fucking around with my friends and having fun and talking. And then when it became popular, other people wanted to come on, and I was like, oh, it'd be cool to talk to that person. Oh, he's interesting. Oh, she's got a cool book out. And then, boom, it's become what it is today, which is like some out-of-control juggernaut that I barely have control of. So my pledge to you is that I will do my best to try to balance out these more controversial viewpoints with other people's perspectives so we can maybe find a better point of view. I don't want to just show the contrary opinion to what the narrative is. I want to show all kinds of opinions so that we can all figure out what's going on, and not just about COVID, about everything, about health, about fitness, wellness, the state of the world itself. It's a strange responsibility to have this many viewers and listeners. It's very strange, and it's nothing that I prepared for, and it's nothing that I ever anticipated. I am going to do my best in the future to balance things out. I'm going to do my best. But my point of doing this is always just to create interesting conversations and ones that I hope people enjoy. So if I pissed you off, I'm sorry. And if you enjoy the podcast, thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you to Spotify. Thank you all the supporters, and even thank you to the haters, because it's good to have some haters. It makes you reassess what you're doing and put things into perspective, and I think that's good too. All right. Much love to you all. Thank you to everyone, and I'm going to do my best.
Welcome to my channel. This is Bruce the Boss, and you just heard Joe Rogan for the first time address the big controversy around his content and what's been going on with Spotify and all of these boomer artists that have been coming out in protest against his content by removing their content from Spotify channel. If you were to just rely on a lot of the mainstream news articles that have come out in the hours since his Instagram statement, you would think he was actually conceding to the label of misinformation. But again, you just heard it right there. He didn't, and it's very disappointing to hear, Wall Street Journal articles and or news organizations like Newsmax try to label the story as though he is conceding to giving out wrong information and apologizing for it. That's not the case. If anything, he apologized to Spotify for just putting them in this uncomfortable position in their situation and losing out on artists who may not be that relevant to their audience base and their viewership, especially in relation to Joe Rogan. But a loss is still a loss for people like Joni Mitchell and Neil Young, for again the few percentage of listeners of their content in the program that even know who they are. But I digress. The other problem I do have otherwise with this label of misinformation, as Joe Rogan already mentioned on his apology video, which again wasn't him consenting to giving out wrong information in the least, but rather was just him apologizing for the situation. But I like how he addressed the concept of misinformation. Now I'll get to that in a second. I will hand it to Spotify for sticking behind Joe Rogan and not censoring him, not removing his content like what Twitter and or YouTube would do. Or YouTube has definitely done that. They've already nuked one of my channels for, quote unquote, misinformation, despite being right, as it turns out, like he mentioned at the end of it. Fast forward from 2021 to now 2022, so much of what I got flagged on last year is now proven to be actual fact, now being put out there by the CNNs and Fox News and the ABCs and Fauci and Rochelle Walensky. This is a very dangerous term that has now been used for a code of groupthink, because the disclaimer now that they're putting on his podcast, or going to put on his podcast going forward, or taking you to a COVID hub, to trusted sites and things like that, or things of that nature, and listening to the expert consensus, have been so wrong from the beginning. And I am old enough to remember when one of these trusted expert sites, the World Health Organization, tweeted out early on in the pandemic that based upon their facts and research and experiments, the virus was not transmittable from human to human. I remember them saying that. I'm old enough to remember them saying that. I'm old enough to remember when God Fauci himself came out and said that masks are not necessary. Oh, by the way, yes, now masks are needed. Oh wait, by the way, cloth masks no longer work. That was considered misinformation a year and a half ago, almost 2 years ago. And a lot of experts and a lot of individuals was already on that boat from the very beginning, because almost all of the research done from, let's say, 2000 to 2019 said that at least cloth masks and surgical masks in particular did very little to, if anything, in stopping aerosol transmission, which is the big factor, a big thing. You really needed N95 masks, and that's what they're now on finally. But that was considered misinformation once. And now all of a sudden, Dr. Leanne Wen of CNN's medical expert team is now promoting, stating that cloth masks was not effective. What is misinformation? Because what is considered misinformation today may be considered known facts tomorrow. The other things he mentioned, not to rehash, but things like whether or not if getting the jab stopped you from getting infected and stopped transmission completely. We have the quote unquote medical expert consensus, whether it was Fauci, Rochelle Walensky, the Biden administration, from Biden himself, all of these individuals, and if you want to consider her an expert, Rachel Maddow coming out and saying it'll stop it completely if you get the jab. that was considered fact back then. And if you questioned it in the beginning, that was labeled misinformation. And then all of a sudden they changed their tune. I even did a video stating this, how there was leaked information showing that the viral load in the jab versus the unjab was exactly the same. And then I also exposed, showed the video that they would love to bury, but they probably just did that segment just to say they did it and put it out there, of Rochelle Walensky coming out and admitting, what? It doesn't stop transmission whatsoever, really. In fact, the Lancet study even shown the transmissibility rate between the unjabbed and the jabbed was barely maybe a 12% differential, if I'm not mistaken. So I hate that term, because who gets to define that? And then I didn't really like him conceding to the term medical consensus in the end of his statement either, because what really is medical consensus? We can show and point out tens of thousands of medical experts who are in the tops of their field, and or doctors who are basing it off of their real world experience with their patients, real trial and error, and seeing what's happening in real time, and basing upon their medical opinions and or expertise off of their own observation. Forget some study, and not even that many randomized test studies either, but some oblique studies that are done. They're seeing real world data, and they're coming out and expressing this. We have tens of thousands of doctors who are brave enough to do that. But then what about all of the other doctors who have seen medical professionals come out, whether it was Dr. Simone Gold or Dr. Stella Emanuel, all of these physicians, and I did a video on another recent doctor, Dr. Ness, who have been coming out and publicly sharing their information that is contrary to the mainstream narrative, and watch them have their careers destroyed and or ruined and or attacked. Dr. Jensen, I believe, up in Minnesota, luckily he's carrying the fight, but he's been investigated numerous times. So all of these other doctors who are watching other colleagues of theirs get eviscerated and or a witch hunt, who's going to want to put up the fight? It's easier to just go along to get along. And then on top of that, from those who are obviously going to just go along with the flow to avoid the persecution, mainstream media is refusing to put on any other medical experts, doctors, scientists that are contrary to the popular narrative. We've had reporters from Fox affiliates and or CBS affiliates like April Moss or Ivory Hacker come out and publicly admit and they say, hey, we are being told we cannot talk about this or cover that, and go outside of certain lines or boundaries when talking with medical experts. So they're not even allowed to even interview any medical experts that have contrary opinions, let alone ask any probing or challenging questions that dare to challenge the narrative. So of course you're going to see a consensus amongst people on the mainstream media when you're only allowed to hear one voice, and the other voices are either censored and or again persecuted again for daring going against the mainstream narrative. And I find it funny that they talked about the 270 people in medical professions and or scientists that came out against Joe Rogan, yet Peter McCullough was able to find 16,000 doctors to go and support him in the statements he made. And speaking of the, Dr. Peter McCullough, for instance, the podcast that Joe Rogan was mentioning that stirred so much of the majority of the controversy, Dr. Peter McCullough, the most published and peer-reviewed scientist in history. This is a man of top credential who he interviewed and was giving his, again, expert opinion and or analysis of the situation. Dr. Robert Malone also given his expert opinion, being someone who has 9 mRNA vaccine patents, and was definitely partially and if not fundamentally important and or instrumental in the development of the current mRNA jabs that we have out there. These are 2 of the most credentialed experts in their field and or in the field of the current topic. If they're not allowed to share their expert opinion, who is? But again, since when was there supposed to be a consensus in science? Science is supposed to be testable, observable, repeatable, questioned, and challenged. to have debates and share facts versus facts. But this is all about having a singular narrative and not allowing certain information to be out there. So that's all this is. I wanted to share that response because there is a lot of misinformation going out there regarding what Joe Rogan did and or did not say in terms of apology, and just wanted to speak to the topic of misinformation. This is Bruce the Boss. Please don't forget to subscribe to this channel, like this video, comment on this video, and I'll talk to you later. Peace.